be our speaker and is an expert in Palatines, and he's going to be speaking on who were the Palatines, a view of the last 500 years. Ed currently works as a librarian for the National Research Council. He completed his PhD in chemistry in 1970 and a postdoc in chemical engineering in 1973 and a Master of Library Science in 1975. So he's more qualified, I guess, to be a librarian at the National Research Council. He's a native of Princeton, Ontario, and since '73 has been interested in genealogy and family history. He's published a book, The Kipp Family, The Descendants of Isaac Kipp and Hannah Mead, a pioneer family of Brant and Oxford counties, Ontario. He published that in 1978. He was twice treasurer of Ottawa Branch in 91 to 93 and 96 to 98. He's been involved with Geneorama for several years, and that's where I met Ed several years ago. And he's been its chair for 1998, 99, and 2001. He is involved in putting databases of interest to genealogists and historians on CD-ROMs. He's published Carleton's Loyalist Index and Book of Negroes on CD-ROM for the Sir Guy Carleton branch of the United Empire Loyalist Association. He's also published Surviving 1851 Census Returns of Ireland, Beechwood Cemetery, and Capitol Memorial Gardens on CD-ROM for the Ottawa branch. He was one of the 3 co-chairs for the OGS Seminar 2000, which was held in Ottawa in May 2000. I'd like you to join me in welcoming Ed Kipp.
Thank you, Bob. Nice to be here. Finally found Ameliasburg after getting through all that Belleville traffic. Boy, that gets bad sometimes. Yeah, I thought it was all the time. I'd just like to point out that there are 2 other librarians here, or budding librarians here as well. My daughter and her friend Susan. They're headed back to London to do their next session.
Hopefully we can show them the library before you head off.
Well, hopefully. I mean, when they get together, they talk about library things, bibliographies and indexes and all that kind of stuff. So, I didn't get a chance to tell you who my families were that I'm looking at. I haven't had a chance to do much research for I don't know how many years. I think I'm doing other things for the Ottawa branch. The MP family and the Lake family from the Cornwall area, both Palatine. I also have Falcons, Parley, Whittaker, and others from New Brunswick. These are loyalist lines, so if anybody has any connections there, let me know. Anyway, I'm going to start my talk now, but I'm going to try talking from the podium at the back. If that doesn't work out, please let me know, and we'll shift things after the first couple of slides, okay? Now, is that focused okay for everybody? Reasonably well? Okay. Good. See if this works. There we are. What I'd like to, this is a talk that I gave at the UEL conference last June 2001 in Cornwall. Hasn't changed substantially since then. I've maybe changed a few slides and so on. So if you've seen it before, hopefully you will enjoy it again. I'd like to start off with some definitions. What is a Palatine, according to the dictionary? Palatine is someone possessing royal privileges such as a Count Palatine, or a native or inhabitant of the Palatinate, a district west of the Rhine. The Palatinate is the land ruled by a Count Palatine. The Palatinate, either of 2 regions of Germany which together composed in 1356 an electorate of the Holy Roman Empire. Now, you can't really see that very well, and I don't think I'm going to really...
Is your pointer?
No, I can't see it either. This is supposed to be a map of Germany, and I'll describe what I want to say about it. Germany as a country did not exist prior to 1871. How about that? We became a country in 1867. It was then a number of separate states whose boundaries changed frequently as a result of war and other causes. The Rhenish Palatinate included lands on both sides of the Middle Rhine between its Main and Neckar tributaries. The capital was Heidelberg. The Upper Palatinate was located in northern Bavaria, on both sides of the Nab River as it flows south towards the Danube, and extended eastward to the Bohemian forest. The term Palatine or Palatine came into use in England with the large immigration of the early 1700s. After that time, the term was generally applied to refer to people from German-speaking lands. If you would like to learn more about the Palatines to America group, I have some brochures at the front later. I'll just mention those now. Now what I'm going to do, after that brief introduction and having provided you some definitions, I'm going to suggest to you who the Palatines were from the viewpoint of people, places, and events that affected them over 500 years. This is not comprehensive by any means, and not all details are covered. I did leave out one thing, actually. There is another definition of a Palatine, and that is a native of Palatine, Illinois. But I don't have any relative ancestors in there, so it can't be right. The first Count Palatine was Herman I, who lived from about 929 to 959. He received the office in 945, and his descendants held that title until 1155. So you can see I'm going to cover a bit more than 500 years. The Bulla Aurea, or Golden Bull, signed into law by Emperor Charles IV in January 1356, made the Count Palatine an elector of the Holy Roman Empire, and also laid out the rules for electing the emperor. Now we're going to skip a couple of hundred years. That's a picture of the Golden Bull. Again, I don't expect you to read that. I'm going to skip ahead a few hundred years to Martin Luther. He really started it all, didn't he? November 10, 1483, born in Eisleben, and he died February the 18th, 1546, in the same place. He was the son of a miner. He studied at the University of Erfurt. Now, I don't speak German, so if anybody wants to try those in real German, please go ahead. He spent 3 years as a monk in the Augustinian convent, and in 1507 was ordained priest. He became a teacher and preacher at the University of Wittenberg. Martin Luther presented his 95 Theses concerning the sale of indulgences to his church superiors on October the 31st, 1571, and founded the Protestant Reform movement. And this is a photograph of the door. The Augsburg Confession of 1530 was a statement of Protestant faith and saw the emergence of a new Protestant church. The followers of Luther became fairly universal throughout Europe in those states which had a Germanic background. In Wittenberg, you will find a monument to Luther, and this is the Luther Monument. It was unveiled in 1821. I haven't actually been there myself, but I know people that have been. The new movement was given clarity and coherence by other reformers, including Ulrich Zwingli and John Calvin. By the middle of the 16th century, Germany, Scandinavia, England, Scotland, and the Low Countries, and large parts of France and Central and Eastern Europe had been won over to the Protestant Reformation. John Calvin was born July the 10th, 1509 in Picardy, France. Died in Geneva, May the 24th, 1564. A generation divided him from Luther, whom he never met. He was greatly influenced by the humanist movement, which was started by Erasmus, who was born in 1466, and the Reform movements. He promoted the literal reading of the Christian scriptures. He created the pattern of thought that would dominate Western culture. Followers of Calvin represented varied ethnic groups. Thus, a diversity came to apply to his followers. In England, they were called Puritans. In Scotland, Presbyterians. In Holland, Walloons. The Huguenots were French Protestants who were members of the Reformed Church, which was established by Calvin in 1550. And I'm going to mention the Huguenots along with the Palatines. The Huguenots. During the 1500s, the kings of France and the Catholic Church persecuted the Protestants or Protestants. On March the 1st, 1562, some 1,200 Huguenots were slain at Bazy, France. This ignited the wars of religion. Here's the example of somebody being burned at the stake. We burn steaks all the time. Sorry about the humor. On the night of August the 23rd, 24th, 1572, the infamous St. Bartholomew's Massacre took place. More than 8,000 Huguenots were killed, including Admiral Gaspard de Coligny. Catherine de Medici, mother of Charles IX of France, was influential in this mass murder. This murder was celebrated by Pope Gregory XIII, including having a special medal struck and having scenes of the massacre painted. On the right side of the slide, you can see the one side of the medal where you have the avenging angel attacking the Protestants. Oops, there we go. Henry IV of France signed the Edict of Nantes on April 13, 1592. Henry was a former Huguenot, Henry of Navarre, who was saved from the massacre by pretending to support the Roman Catholic faith, which he did do in 1593. This is a photograph of the Edict of Nantes. This brought an end to the wars of religion. After Henry IV was murdered in 1610, the persecution of the Huguenots continued under Cardinal Richelieu. The point here is that the persecution within France forced many Huguenots to flee the country, many to the Palatinate, and I'm going to come back to that again a little bit later. The next person I'd like to talk about that had an influence on the Palatines is Frederick V, born August the 26th, 1596, in Amberg, Upper Palatinate, died November the 29th, 1632, in Mainz, Germany. He succeeded his father, the Elector Frederick IV, in 1610 as Elector Palatine. He was called the Winter King. His election in 1619 as King of Bohemia precipitated the 30 Years' War. His armies were routed in the Battle of the White Mountain near Prague in November 1620 by the Catholic League. He was deposed and the electorate was transferred to Maximilian I of Bavaria. Now here's some interesting connections. Frederick V married Elizabeth Stuart, whose father was James I of England. The Hanoverian kings of England were descended from Frederick and his wife, through their daughter Sarah, who married Duke Ernst Augustus of Brunswick. Their son was George I of England. A grandson of George I was Frederick Louis Hanover, Prince of Wales, who became King George III of England. And we'll hear more about King George as well. The 30 Years' War covered the years 1619 to 1648 and may be considered as a struggle of German Protestant princes and foreign powers against the unity and power of the Holy Roman Empire as represented by the Habsburgs allied with the Catholic princes. The Palatinate and other parts of Germany suffered from the horrors of fire and sword, as well as pillage and plunder by the French and other armies, but particularly the French. This is a painting of the 30 Years' War. It doesn't look terribly bad from here, but I think it was. The Peace of Westphalia, which was signed on October the 21st, 1648, lessened the power and influence of the Holy Roman Empire. It also saw beginnings of the modern European state system. The next war, the next couple of wars that had an influence on the Palatines are listed on this slide here. First one is the War of the Grand Alliance. This is called King William's War in America. And this was a war between France and a coalition of European powers known as the League of Augsburg, and after 1689 as the Grand Alliance. It started off as a defensive alliance formed by the Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I with various German states, including Bavaria and the Palatinate. It was a community of German feeling against the French. The Grand Alliance included Austria, England, and the Netherlands. Louis XIV and the French took the opportunity during this time period to invade the empire and devastate the Palatines again. The Treaty of Ryswick, October 1697, is what I want to talk about next. And basically, this ended the war, but it was because of the exhaustion of the belligerents and the indecisive outcome of many battles. That was the reason it ended. This war was known on the American continent as King William's War, which I've already mentioned, and William III ended up being acknowledged as King of England. The War of the Spanish Succession, or Queen Anne's War in America, is the next one that I wish to talk about. This was the last of the general European wars caused by the efforts of Louis XIV to extend French power. The precarious health of the childless King Charles II of Spain left the succession open to claims from three principal contenders, one of them being Louis XIV on behalf of his eldest son, who was a grandson of King Philip IV of Spain, the Electoral Prince of Bavaria, Joseph Ferdinand, a great-grandson of Philip IV, and the Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I, who had married a younger daughter of Philip IV. So they were all connected there and fighting for that succession. The course of the war saw fighting in Italy, the Low Countries, Bavaria, and the lands between France and the German states. In 1707, Louis sent Marshal Villars to attack the Palatinate, and he duplicated the cruelties, pillage, and destruction of 1674. This all ended with the Peace of Utrecht in 1713, with France, England, and Holland signing the peace. Charles VI, Holy Roman Emperor, consented in 1714. This peace saw the principles of balance of power take precedence over dynastic or national rights in the negotiation of European affairs. This is a picture of a painting of Louis XIV. He became king at age 5 when his father, Louis XIII, died. His mother, Anne of Austria, acted as regent. This was a period of rebellion and strife. At his coronation, he swore to defend the Catholic faith, to honor his oath and preserve the religious unity of the kingdom. He persecuted the Protestants. He was called the Sun King, and he reigned from 1642 to 1715. In 1674, Louis XIV sent, and I'm repeating a few things here, because I'm talking about particular events or people at one time. Louis XIV in 1674 sent Marshal Turenne to devastate the Palatinate. In 1685, he revoked the Edict of Nantes, which had originally been signed in 1598, which had guaranteed the freedom of religious worship to the Huguenots in France. Persecution of the Huguenots resumed with zeal. It is estimated 400,000 fled to the Palatinate, Switzerland, England, South Africa, and America. In America, the two places I'd like Well, three places I'd like to mention with respect to this is Hurley and New Paltz in New York State and South Carolina. So some of these things led to the migrations of the Palatines from Germany to other places in the world. The reasons for these migrations, well, we've heard some of them. Their homeland had been ravaged again and again by wars of the previous century, and in particular by the French. The winter of 1708 was particularly severe in their area. There had been advertising in their area about settlement in the English colonies in America. In England, the Naturalization Act was passed by the English Parliament in 1709, which would allow them to become citizens of England. Now, religious persecution, that has been mentioned many times in a lot of books I've read as being one of the main reasons that they left the Palatinate. But this may or may not be the case. I think the other reasons are more relevant. There is an example of a document from the Protestant consistory in the Palatinate denying any religious persecution by the elector Palatine, and this is dated June the 27th, 1709. You'll find this in a book by Nittel, if you've run across that book on the Palatines. Now I'd like to move on to other people relating to America and how they got here. William Penn, 1644 to 1718. He was the founder of Pennsylvania and son of Sir William Penn, a distinguished English admiral. He was expelled from Oxford, traveled the continent, studied law, and in 1667 became a Quaker. For his beliefs and writings, he was imprisoned in the Tower of London in 1682. After his release, he made a preaching tour of Holland and Germany, where he advocated tolerance of religious beliefs. He preached in Kriegsheim in 1677. He was able to obtain a charter creating him as proprietor and governor of eastern New Jersey and Pennsylvania. He promoted the idea of settlement in America. Next, I'd like to talk about Reverend Joshua Kocherthal. Born July the 30th, 1699 as Joshua Harsh in the Kocherthal or Kocher Valley. He became a Lutheran clergyman in 1696. In 1704 or 6, he made a trip to England to familiarize himself with the conditions in the colonies. He met with various promoters of settlement in Virginia and Carolinas in America. On his return to the Palatinate, he wrote a booklet on the settlement possibilities in America, selecting Carolina to write about without ever having been there. In 1706, he published the book, and this is, I think, the cover of it. I don't know whether I can pronounce this or not. Ausführlich und umständlicher Bericht von der berühmten Landschaft Carolina. A literal translation being detailed and circumstantial account of the celebrated province of Carolina. And he published this under the pseudonym of Joshua Kocherthal. This booklet was quite positive about settlement in the colonies and had a wide circulation in the Palatinate. In 1708, we had the start of the first migration of the Palatines to America. Reverend Joshua Kocherthal and 41 Palatines visited England and petitioned Queen Anne for their settlement in America. The petition was referred to the London Board of Trade and approved. The Palatines would be settled on the Hudson River in the province of New York. Another 14 were added before the group sailed with the new governor, Lord Lovelace. And this is a drawing of Lord Lovelace. Governor Lord Francis Lovelace died 1709, unfortunately. In October 1708, they shipped out on the ship Globe. They arrived in New York City after a voyage of 9 weeks. At the end of the year, the group was at the mouth of Classic Creek near present-day Newburgh, New York. This is about 60 miles above New York City. They were subsisted there by Governor Lovelace. Unfortunately, he died May the 6th, 1709. And in order to keep the new colony going, Colcherstall sailed back to England in August 1709 to obtain more permanent funding for the colony at Newburgh. By 1709, many Palatines had endured the 4 to 6 week passage down the Rhine to Rotterdam and then on to England. Estimates indicate that from 13 to 32,000 Palatines made their way to England by November 1709. A contemporary pamphlet lists the home principalities as follows: the Palatinate, the districts of Darmstadt and Hanau, Franconia, including the area around the cities of Nuremberg, Bayreuth, and Würzburg, the Archbishopric of Mayence and Treves, the districts of Spires, Worms, Hesse, Darmstadt, Zweibrücken, Nassau, Alsace, and Baden. The condition of all arriving in London awakened the greatest pity in the British, and they were referred to as the poor Palatines. What to do with the refugees became a serious problem for the English government. And what I'd like to do here is just read a couple of lines from the document that they used for petitioning the British government. The state of the poor Palatines, as humbly represented by themselves upon their first arrival in this kingdom about June 1709. We, the poor distressed Palatines, whose utter ruin was occasioned by the merciless cruelty of a bloody enemy, the French, whose prevailing power some years past, like a torrent, rushed into our country and overwhelmed us at once, and being not content with money and food necessary for their occasions, not only dispossessed us of all their support, but inhumanely burnt our house to the ground, where, being deprived of all shelter, we were turned into open fields, and there drove with our families to seek what shelter we could find, being obliged to make the cold earth our lodgings, and the clouds our covering. And it goes on with more detail. The Palatine London census of 1709 records about 6,000 names. Now, we'll have her next. This is a woodcut of the Palatines on Blackheath, just outside of London, England, this will be 1709. Now, what happened to the Palatines? Well, some of them were absorbed into the English population. Ireland absorbed about 3,500, many of whom later went to America. South Carolina received around 700. Death claimed many on Blackheath. Some 2,000 Catholics were sent back to their homes in Germany. Some enlisted in the English army, and some were sent to America. The London Board of Trade deliberated and came up with a plan to locate about 3,000 Palatines in the province of New York, where they would manufacture naval stores. This plan was based on information from ill-informed advisors, but it was approved by the London Board of Trade and Queen Anne. This is a painting of Queen Anne. James I, King of England, married Anne of Denmark. A daughter of theirs was Elizabeth Stuart, who we already know married Frederick V, Elector Palatine. son of James became Charles I, King of England. His son was James II, and James' daughter was Anne Stuart, Queen of England. She married Prince George of Denmark, and she was the successor to William III, and she was succeeded by her own cousin, George I. Everybody got that straight? Don't ask me to repeat it without reading it, please. You get the idea that they're all connected anyways. This is Prince George. He was of German stock and a Lutheran, so the Queen was obviously susceptible to the Palatine appeals for help. Now, there were many trials they still had to endure to get to America, and one of these was sailing. It wasn't exactly a pleasant trip, I don't think. The ships were generally filthy and crowded, foul air, vermin, little sunlight. The sea voyages could take 6 to 12 weeks or even longer sometimes. They often had, well, most of the time they had bad food or no food at all. And the water was terrible, unsanitary, they ate wormy biscuits. It sounds great, doesn't it? They suffered disease and death at sea, and storms sometimes wrecked their ships, so they were lucky to get there. This is a drawing that somebody made of what it might have looked like below deck. The drawing looks dreary and dark. Burial at sea and shipwreck. Next we move to the province of New York. The new governor of New York at that time was Robert Hunter, who died in 1734. The first sailing took place in April 1710, landing in New York on June the 13th, 1710. There were 10 ships carrying about 3,000 Palatines. 9 ships, including the Lion, Globe, Berkeley Castle, and the Bedford, reached New York with a loss of several hundred lives. One ship, the Herbert, was wrecked off Long Island. Most of the people on the ship were saved, but all supplies and the ship were lost. This particular group of Palatines were settled on land purchased from Robert Livingston on the east side of the Hudson River, and some were settled on Crown land on the west side of the Hudson River. The Naval Stores project that they had been brought out to work on did not work out for many reasons, and I think you've probably read about this in many books, and I'm not going to repeat them. The Palatines were not treated well by their landlord, Robert Livingston, and other colonial officials and speculators didn't treat them much better. So, Robert Livingston, after arriving in America, he married into the Van Rensselaer family. Through trading and other dealings, he became wealthy and influential. Livingston has been described by an American as, quote, America's first slum landlord. And I've been told in those uncertain terms that I'm supposed to mention who the American is. Some of you may have run across the name Herman Wyckoff in your travels. He lives in Chatham, New York. Very nice gentleman. The Palatines of 1709 lived, and again I don't expect you to be able to read this, they lived on Livingston Manor, East Camp, New York, and its dwarfs of Ansbury, Queensbury, Haysbury, Huntertown. All of these are now referred to as Germantown. This is one of the areas we visited on our Hudson Valley trip a couple of years ago. With the Naval Stores project abandoned by 1712, the Palatines were advised to fend for themselves, but were ordered not to leave the province. About 30 families purchased land from Henry Beekman and moved south to Rhinebeck. Some stayed in the area of present-day Germantown. This is another sort of stylized drawing of East Camp or Germantown. The Hudson River is the dark line on the left, and the various dwarfs that I mentioned are written in there as well. Let's start off with East Camp, or Germantown. This is a plaque you'll find in the local park. It's called Palatine Park, and it says, in memory of 1,484 refugees from the Rhineland who settled in the East Camp during the autumn of 1710. East Camp became Germantown. This is a photograph of the old parsonage in East Camp. Dates back to the early 1700s. Across the river, we have the village of West Camp, settled 1710 by Palatines in the Rhineland for production of naval stores, built church and school during first winter. The Lutheran church is just across the road from that first plaque, and this is the plaque that sits in front of the church. Lutheran church organized in 1710 by Palatines, first pastor Reverend Joshua Culturthal. First church near site of present church. This is a photograph of the present church, St. Paul's Lutheran. Looks like a foggy day there. Another older photograph, probably taken towards, probably the early 1900s, last century now. And one thing I would like to mention here is this Palatine Monument, which is just to the side of St. Paul's Lutheran Church in West Camp. And it's called the Palatine Monument, and it was dedicated in 1998. I would love to have been there for that, but couldn't make it at that time. If anybody would like to know what names are on that monument, I do have them listed on this piece of paper here. You can look at it later. I'd just like to read the first paragraph. It reads, "Know, O traveler, within sight of this hill on October the 6th, 1710, led by the Reverend Joshua Kocherthal and the Reverend Johann Friedrich Hager, there arrived on the east and west shores of Hudson River nearly 300 families of refugees of the Palatine region in Europe, who suffered many sorrows in the ravages of war, sickness, poverty, and destitution, yet survived to settle these shores. Sustained by their faith in the Lord and the sympathy of Queen Anne of England, whom they came to serve in the reduction of the pine forest for naval stores for Her Majesty's fleet. Do you wish to know more? Seek out their names on this tablet, on the pages of history, their deeds." Now, as I said, the Palatines didn't all stay in that area. Some of them did. Some of them moved south. Some of them moved west and northwest. This drawing represents the struggle of those Palatines who left West and East Camp and struggled through the wilderness. Many went to the Schoharie Valley in New York, as they felt this land had been promised them in their original contract. This happened in the winter of 1712 and 13. However, in Schoharie there were problems with land speculators, and the authorities refused to let them settle. Some did, of course, at a later date after buying their land. The main leader in this movement in the Schoharie Valley was Conrad Weiser. This is a map of the Schoharie Valley. All of the names on there are in German. Towards the top, I guess where the rivers come together is where Schoharie sits today. The bottom third of the map where you have the little side creek coming off is where Weiserberg was, or the current town of Middleburg, New York. I don't know whether anybody here has ever been there or not. Has anybody been to the Sahara Valley? Walk around? A couple of people, good. So, while we have some staying in the East and West Camp, going south to Rhinebeck, others staying in the Schoharie Valley. Those that didn't want to deal with the land speculators moved or migrated to eastern Pennsylvania near Tulpehocken to be with other German countrymen who had been treated better in Pennsylvania. This is where one branch of my MP family went, the non-loyalist branch. I mentioned Conrad Weiser. This is a painting of him, 1696 to 1760. He lived with the Indians as a youth and learned their language and customs. This was to serve him well in later years as interpreter for his fellow Palatine and colonial authorities. It's been claimed that a lot of the things that I've read that Conrad Weiser sort of kept the mini-revolution going in the Schoharie Valley, and that if he hadn't been around, a lot of things might have been settled sooner. But who knows? Okay, just a brief break here. I need to make a change. I have two sets that some of them migrated to the Mohawk Valley of New York State, from Stone Arabia west to Herkimer. The Stone Arabia patent is dated 1723. This is a photograph of the two churches in Stone Arabia. The Stone Reformed Church at the front of the picture, and in the background is the Lutheran Church. Stone Arabia churches, the Reformed Church, both of the churches date from after the end of the Revolution, because most of the buildings in the Mohawk Valley were burned by our ancestors. The Reformed Church dates from 1788. Trinity Lutheran dates from 1790. This is another view of the Stone Arabia Reformed Church in Stone Arabia. An older view of it. The Old Palatine Church, which is what this is, dates from 1770, before the Revolution actually. One of the few buildings not burned in the raids in the Mohawk Valley, and it was partly due to members of the Nellis family. And there's a story attached to this, which I won't go into. Another older view of the Palatine Church before all the trees and stuff grew up around it. Another location in the Mohawk Valley which relates to the Palatines and the American Revolution is Fort Clock, which dates from 1750, and it's situated a couple of kilometers east of St. Johnsville, New York, north of the Mohawk River. Nearby is the Battle of Clock's Field. This is another view of Fort Clock. The old Fort Herkimer Church, which is a little bit west of St. Johnsville, dates from 1767. On the next slide, we have a view of the pulpit within this church, which is supposed to have been the pulpit that was used to stylize the pulpit in Drums Along the Mohawk. And this is the pulpit that Dominique Rosenkrantz stood at to talk to his, now should I use rebel or patriot congregation. And this is a map of the Palatine settlements And again, it's hard to see this, but on the right you have the Hudson River, so you have East Camp, West Camp, a little bit to the west. You have the Schoharie River coming down with the various settlements there, including Schoharie, Middleburg, and so on. And then you have the Mohawk River going east and west across the top with the various settlements there, including Stone Arabia, Herkimer, and so on. So that was sort of a little interlude to show you some of the locations where if you have Palatine ancestors that came to the Mohawk Valley, they may have lived and visited these locations. I'd like to then move on to the next war, or series of wars that affected the Palatines that moved to America. First one being the French and Indian War. So the efforts of the Palatines were to be ravaged again by the struggle between Britain and France for possession of the North American continent. The outcome of the battle on the Plains of Abraham on September the 15th, 1759 decided that result. With the Treaty of Paris in 1763, French control of Canada ended. Sir William Johnson also had an effect on the Palatines. His dates are 1715 to 1774. He was a frontier developer, businessman, Indian diplomat, military leader, Masonic enthusiast, and all-around British official. He was one of the most important people in colonial New York. In 1738, he left Ireland and headed for the Mohawk Valley to manage the lands of his uncle, Sir Peter Warren. Sir Peter Warren was involved in the taking of Louisburg in 1745. Sir William became a merchant and trader and built up his influence over the Indians and settlers, including the Palatines of that area. He also acquired his own land. He completed Fort Johnson in 1749, and this is near Amsterdam, New York. He was successful in battle in 1755 against the French commander Baron Dieskau at the Battle of Lake George, for which he was given his baronetcy and a cash award. In February 1756, he received his appointment as sole agent and superintendent of Indians and their affairs. He was also in the right place in 1759 to play a role in the capture of Fort Niagara. In 1768, he was instrumental in the signing of the Treaty of Fort Stanwix, which essentially determined a boundary over which there was to be no white settlement or incursion. In 1763, he moved into Johnson Hall at Johnstown. His influence with the Indians reigned until his death on the eve of the Revolution. Now, another person involved in the Revolution was, there's a couple more slides here. This is the memorial stone found in St. Johnstown, New York, for Sir William Johnson. In the central quadrangle in the town, where you'll find a number of other historic items. And a monument to Sir William Johnson, near Johnson Hall. So the next fellow I'd like to talk about with respect to the American Revolution is King George III. He was the eldest son of Frederick, Prince of Wales, who was the son of George II. He was the third Hanoverian monarch, but the first to be born in England and used English as his first language. His reign was marred by two notable incidents. Can anybody tell me what they were? Yes, the loss of the American colonies, and? Well, he was quite mad, right? So.
Oh, he burned the war as well?
No, he was quite mad, the king's madness.
Oh.
Sorry, maybe not quite as bad as losing the American colonies.
Produced enough kids to get names for all of these places like Ameliasburg,
Of course.
Ameliasburg, all of it, Fredericksburg.
So he did something good.
I thought it was good enough, but it happened.
Another view of King George. The American Revolution took place from 1776 to 1783 and can be described as America's first civil war. This 13-star flag supposedly flew over Fort Stanwix, and it currently resides at the Old Palatine Church at Fox's Mills near St. Johnsville, New York. The revolution resulted in many Palatines and other loyalists moving to Canada. Many did stay in the United States, and descendants to this day live in the Mohawk and Schoharie valleys and in Pennsylvania and other places. If I could just make an aside here, one of the things you may or may not know that myself and another person, George Anderson, do bus tours. Sort of an advertisement too. We do bus tours to the Mohawk Valley, and we've done one to the Hudson Valley. But since we started doing these in 1998, we have seen a decided change in the way the Americans view us, I think. Before that, I don't think they really cared one way or another, or didn't know anything about it, one or the other. But now they are becoming more aware of the loyalists, and some of them are actually saying that they're actually looking into the early history so they can find out more about it. So, we haven't done anything else. We've at least shown people where their ancestors came from and maybe made an influence on the Americans. This is an example of the type of treatment that the Tories or Loyalists received from the rebels during the Revolution. Tarring and feathering, for one. They also rode them around on rails, or in the back. Sometimes the treatment was a little bit more drastic, like hanging. And of course, filling them up with tea until they couldn't hold anymore. In the Mohawk Valley, one of the battles that had a decided influence on the Palatines was the Battle of Oriskany. This took place on August the 6th, 1776, at Oriskany, just east of Rome, New York. When an American relief column going to Fort Stanwix under the direction of General Nicholas Herkimer was attacked and devastated by the British Indians and colonials. Palatine neighbors fought against each other at this battle. The outcome of this bloody battle was to have far-reaching consequences for both sides in the war. Whether anybody won that battle is sort of up to your point of view, whether you were a rebel or Tory. But it had a decided influence on the outcome of the war. The British and their allies retreated from the field and had to abandon, as a result, the siege of Fort Stanwix. The colonials under Herkimer lost several hundred men killed, thus setting back Mohawk Valley settlement for years. The final result is that men were freed up to assist the colonial army under Schuyler and later Gates to bring about the surrender of Burgoyne at Saratoga and win a major victory for the American cause. Now, one of the little notes that I wrote in here from something I saw the other day, and I read this on an American website. About the time of the beginning of the American Revolution, somebody claims that there were about 15,000 people in the Mohawk Valley. By the end of the Revolution, that was down to about 5,000 people. So obviously not all of them were killed. A lot of them left. And obviously not all of the Palatines stayed in America. Some of them went somewhere else, like Canada. And as I said, they're becoming more aware of this down there. The Oriskany Battlefield Monument. Has anybody been there? Good, a couple of people. It's really worthwhile seeing. If you get there on a day when they're open and one of the interpreters is there, you'll quite often get a very good tour across the battlefield. They'll give it to you step by step in great gory detail. Quite interesting. Another person who influenced the Palatines is Sir John Johnson, son of William Johnson. He set out to organize the settlers against the revolution, but failed. He and his followers fled to Montreal in May 1776. He served with Barry St. Leger at Fort Stanwix and led a detachment at Oriskany. He was allowed to raise a battalion called the King's Royal Regiment of New York, or the Royal Yorkers. He led several raids into the Mohawk and Schoharie valleys, the most famous being the raid of 1780, which they refer to down there now as the Burning of the Valley. This is an example of King's Royal Regiment in uniform. Sorry if I'm not covering regiments that settled in this area. I'll have to apologize for not doing that. But I'm more familiar with the ones that settled further east. Although some of the King's Royal Regiment did settle in this area. This is a map of Sir John Johnson's raid of 1780 through the Schoharie Valley. Again, I can't expect you to read that, but on the left you have they started Schoharie Creek flows from the left side of the screen to the right in this picture. And on the left side of the screen you have the upper fort. About in the middle you have Middleburg, where the middle fort was that they attacked. And then you have on the right hand side of the screen the lower fort, which is Schoharie. That little sort of banana-shaped thing on the top left corner is Reuben's Nose, if you've ever been in the Schoharie Valley. I've run across that. Great place to take a hike. I mean, if you're into hiking. I got it. The next three slides are drawings of the three forts. The upper fort. This is a picture actually of the plaque where the middle fort was situated. Just out from the screen and a little bit to the right is the Middleburg Reformed Church. It's a very interesting church to visit if you get a chance. A sketch of the middle fort and a sketch of the lower fort, which is the old stone fort in Schoharie. This is an actual picture of the old stone fort. If you have visited this or you decide to visit, have a look at the stones in the wall. You will see names scratched into these stones. Let's see if I can get this right. The names were supposed to be the names of people who were living in that area about the time of the Revolution, or maybe actually they're defending the fort. You will find that a number of names have been scratched out, and you can guess who these names might have belonged to. The other side, the Loyalist side. Interesting to look at. If you go around to the back, you'll find a spot up underneath the eaves where the cannon shot that Sir John Johnson and his troops fired hit the fort. They have this label. One of the things that, before I move on to John Butler, one of the things that Sir John did is that he helped settle the Loyalists along the front of the St. Lawrence, in particular in the Cornwall area, and some here as well. And he built a manor house at Williamstown, Ontario. Another person that had a great influence on the Revolution and consequently the Palatines was John Butler. He spent many years working in the Indian Department of Sir William Johnson. He was in action at Ticonderoga, Lake George, and the capture of Fort Frontenac. Niagara, and Montreal. Over the years, he accumulated a lot of land in the Mohawk Valley as well, approximately 27,000 acres. And he was probably the second largest landowner next to Sir William. During the Revolution, he was authorized to raise a corps of rangers, which became known as Butler's Rangers. The Rangers accomplished many successful raids in New York and Pennsylvania. After the war, he settled down to farming in the Niagara area, and became the de facto leader and served in many official capacities over the years. It has been written that he could be described as one of the founding fathers of Upper Canada. I'm sure others would be included as well. One of the people that they hate the most in the Mohawk Valley is Walter Butler. And he was probably one of the most hated and vilified loyalists of his time. He was commissioned an ensign in the King's 8th Regiment. He transferred to Butler's Rangers, where he was a captain. After Oriskany, he led a recruiting expedition behind enemy lines and was captured at Shoemaker's Tavern. He escaped, and he is forever connected with the Cherry Valley Massacre in spite of the fact that Brant was there as well. He was killed at West Canada Creek, October the 30th, 1780. Up till a few years ago, Shoemaker's Tavern still existed in Ilion, New York, but we were looking for it last year and we were told it had burned down a few years back. But there is a plaque on the main street. If you're driving through there, have a look for it. This is an older photograph of Butlersbury, where John Butler lived, just a little bit south of Johnstown, New York. There's an example of a Butler's Ranger. West Canada Creek, which is near Hurstburn, New York. I don't think they know the exact spot where Walter Butler was killed, but somewhere on this creek. Another person that had a decided influence on the Loyalists was Joseph Brant. Thayendanegea. He was a Mohawk war chief and brother of Molly Brant. During the Revolution, he fought along with the Loyalists in an attempt to retain Indian lands. At the unsuccessful conclusion of the war, Brant led the Mohawks to a large tract of land along the Grand River in Ontario. He was well educated and was involved in translating parts of the Bible into Mohawk under the direction of Reverend John Stewart. Now, I also realize that there was a settlement of Indians here in this area too, at Deserongo. Sir Guy Carleton had another influence on the Loyalists in particular, and the Palatines, of course, were included in that. He was an army officer and was twice governor at Quebec, 1768 to 1778 and 1785 to 1795. He was the British commander-in-chief at New York in 1780-83 and thus oversaw the evacuation of the Loyalist refugees and military personnel from New York City to Nova Scotia. Sir Frederick Haldimand, who we should all know about. He was a native of Switzerland. He served in various continental armies, including that of Frederick the Great. He was commander of posts at Three Rivers, Pensacola, and St. Augustine between 1758 and 1777. Acting commander-in-chief in North America from 1773 to 74. And governor and commander-in-chief in Canada from 1778 to 84. He was successful in securing the province against internal disturbance and American attack. Before leaving his command late in 1784, he assisted in the settlement of several thousand Loyalist refugees from the United States in Quebec. Quebec, of course, extending all the way across to the Detroit River and across a bit further. Actually, maybe even the Mississippi. Forgotten. Now, many of our Loyalist ancestors, of course, didn't go to Nova Scotia, but they came across country to this part of the world. They started off their life in Quebec or Canada in refugee camps, which were located along the St. Lawrence River at places like Sorel, Ashish, and Three Rivers. They had been in these locations throughout the war. This is a view of Sorel drawn by James Peachy at that particular time period. I have several slides here which I'll just click through and let you read the title. So, a lot of them, of course, a lot of the Loyalists were settled in the Niagara area. The others started off in the refugee camps in Quebec. In 1783, I've already mentioned this, many shiploads arrived in Nova Scotia, and in 1784 the new province of New Brunswick was split off from Nova Scotia. For the Loyalists along the St. Lawrence River, in 1784 many of the Loyalists from the refugee camps on the St. Lawrence River moved up the St. Lawrence to settle at Johnstown, which is now Cornwall, and along the St. Lawrence River from Charlottenburg in Glengarry to the Bay of Quinte. You may have seen these pictures in various places. Drawing of lots. Again, you can't see that slide. I've got to get a better slide for that. If we just went back a couple of slides, you may remember that there was the drawing of lots. And in that connection, I will remind you of Loyalist Day at Adolphustown. I'm sure I don't have to remind you. I hope to be there this year. It's a great place to be. To be there in costume. What is it, June the 15th this year, that's right. I have June 19th here. That's actually Loyalist Day in Ontario. And in that connection, I would like to, and I'm not going to read this because it will take about 10 minutes, but if you're on the web, have a look at the United Empire Loyalist website, www.uelac.org, that's the new one. And on that site you will find a very good article written by Alexander Roman, which is entitled The Significance of June the 19th, Loyalist Day. If you haven't read that, you should read it. If you don't have access to the web, get somebody to print it off for you. It's worthwhile reading. It's just as relevant today as it ought to be relevant any time. So just to summarize then, you may think I got off track by talking about the Loyalists, but the Palatines are definitely, many of them were Loyalists, so you know what happened to them after the American Revolution is definitely entwined with the Loyalists. So, they suffered many things, many migrations. I don't think I'll go through those, I'll just leave that on for a few seconds and let you sort of look at it. They basically went from France to the Palatines back to Holland, England, New York State, Schoharie, Pennsylvania, Mohawk Valley, Canada. And as I have on the bottom line there, later many Pennsylvania Deutsch from Pennsylvania came to Canada in the 1850s after a stint with Republican rule. Move on. These are the various wars that disrupted them. And the most recent disruption along the St. Lawrence, of course, was the Seaway Project. So what are the characteristics of these people? Self-starters, they were hardy, they were determined, passionate, thrifty, resourceful, religious, and I'm sure we could find many other terms to describe them. In conclusion, I think these words can be used to describe you and I, and our ancestors, no matter whether they were Palatines or not. Thank you, and God save King George III.
We have a little presentation.
Sure. I'm also willing to accept questions.
Oh, okay, draw new questions. Anybody have any questions? We got the horses out here, so we've got a chance to ask.
I'm interested in the Buellers. Who came to, I'm living in a house that was built by Martin Miller, I think his name is Martin Bueller. Born in the States in 1815, but I'm interested to know where. Any idea where the,
No, I haven't run across that name, and I don't have specific names in my talk. Does anybody else know anything about the Bueller?
Buellers?
Bueller?
Bueller?
Muellers are in.
Oh, Bueller. Bueller, sorry.
They're in To Their Is Forever.
Yeah,
Hamburgers.
yeah.
Quite a bit.
Some of them came here and went back. I'm interested to know where they went back.
No, I don't know. All right.
Okay, I just wanted to point out to you while you're coming up that Paul Johnson here, who's the Quinte Prince Edward direct descendant of Johnson. Okay. Was here at the sod church, the opening, and several other things in this place. And happened to be the MP at that time, definitely not a Tory. But that's just an aside. But I was thinking about it as you were talking about them here, that he's down there looking at it. Oh, yeah, sure.
You mentioned to him that this is another advertisement.
No, for German.
The next Mohawk Valley bus tour is this fall in September. It's being put on by the Johnson Manor House Committee in Williamstown. If you're interested, let me know.
He is a counselor. The first thing I'd like to do is I'd just like to give you a magnet that has our website on it. Okay. So you can get a hold of us. You were talking about whether we know about the Loyalist Days. You'll see the poster over there.
Well, I know you know
And
what it is.
free of charge, they set it down as running one in our paper. It's in our
Okay,
paper.
good.
The only problem with that paper is the printer had a little problem with the pictures, but other than that, we're all right. We'd like to give you this so you can buy 6 cents for the gas.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That's the branch is doing that. And we'd like to give you this certificate. And as I pointed out to you earlier, I spelled your name wrong, which is one of the things, I can give you a long story about spelling wrong over the years.
Well, hopefully,
But we're going to give you a new one. And if you just want to look right down that way.
hopefully that spelling isn't too far off and they're really connected with the Kip family.
Is it Richard?
No.
Oh, okay.
Nothing to do with that.
No, some people want to get connected.
I know.
Anyway, that's part of the humor, like at the beginning of your talk. So we will do you a new one, but you take the frame and we'll send you a new one, all signed, sealed, delivered. So thanks a lot for coming.
Your name has a displaced P on it as well.
Yes. And my spelling of things wrong goes way back when I was in public school at about grade 6, when I spelled the word Australia wrong on a banner that couldn't be seen until the spring when it was finished, a big mural, and we rolled it out and take it to the exhibition in Australia. It was spelled wrong, nobody noticed it. In the beginning, it's easier to change than now.
Yes, it is.
Thanks a lot.